Hello guys, welcome to the Trading Parrot. On Sunday, Avalanche managed to close right against global weekly resistance, and this week we are above it. So this could turn by the end of this week into a global breakout for Avalanche. And because of that, I have decided to make a very special in-depth video looking at TA of Avalanche from the long point of view, comparing it with ratios against Ethereum and Total3. Something big might come for Avalanche if we manage to do this one thing. And don't get me wrong, there is a huge amount of risk sitting underneath the current prices, so do not be surprised that we get to bite the cake right after a little bit of bitterness. First, in this video we'll look into news, liquidation pools, on-chain data. Get ready, get comfy for packed information about Avalanche AVAX. Guys, if you like this type of content, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, hit the notification bell to get notified every time I put out one of these videos. Can we get 1,000 likes on this video? That will be fantastic. Interesting, but the views on the altcoin videos are primarily going to Solana, despite the fact that Avalanche is doing pretty big moves. Today is 7% up. Together with IMX and XMR, Aero are leading the way for today, one day ahead of the FOMC meeting. Let's look at the chart of the weekly RSI on AVAX. This is very interesting because we got a structure that has higher lows on the lower end and lower highs. This is not the first time that we see a coin doing something like this, which is reflecting that there is some sort of squeeze coming in. If there is bullishness in the market, if we sustain this altcoin season for slightly longer than we have done so far this cycle, Avalanche could do a pretty intense move up, and I really want to focus on that potential, of course, without discarding or excluding the downside potential too. Why is that? Because this weekend we managed to close at 58.66. That's right on the spot of the resistance. This week that you see up in here, the breakout is not really a confirmed breakout. That's an intra-candle move that we have so far managed to hold for 2 days out of 7 this week. This could perfectly end up pointing down and being just a close underneath that resistance. The last time I made a video was early August, and I drew these red lines in here pointing towards a test of that resistance. Well, here we are right on time testing that number as I'm speaking at the moment. So far the structure up looks pretty healthy. Higher highs, higher lows. Momentum hasn't declined that much as we approach the resistance as we've seen with other coins. Looking at the price action, we can see that the structure has a lower high here in December relative to what it managed to do in March of 2024. It managed to get to around $65 and then only 54. So that is an area of concern because this breakout, in theory, if it survives next Sunday and is still above the resistance, it could lead the price into around $50. That will be basically just repeating that performance of testing a downwards trend line like this. Ideally, I want to search for clues that AVAX is gonna do a lot more than that only. That $50 doesn't seem to be something that difficult to achieve in a context where there is a bit more risk on assets performing. So for that, let's look, for example, into a 1618. Let's say if we get into $78, targets like that can become realistic ones if we can find that clue, which I'm gonna cover later in the video because I have found some stuff that says that potentially AVAX could do something incredible. And I'm not talking about ETFs and all of these things based on news. I'm talking about technicals, not just against the dollar, but against Ethereum and Total3. In the previous cycle, Avalanche managed to get to $150. So there will be people thinking, well, this is a pretty strong layer 1 that can do a lot more than just getting into $50, right? Let's go one step at the time. Let's look at the longs versus shorts. What is going on currently? Well, we were monitoring this resistance and we were talking about a potential breakout. We had the breakout in April. It's been dragging a little bit too low. We pinch the PNR. This indicator is part of a suite of indicators that I have built throughout the years that you can get access through if you get a 3, 6 month or 12 month subscriptions of all my Pine scripts. Go to my Patreon website and look up for the tab shop. That's where you can buy them. So far, AVAX, each and every time it pierces the lowest percentile of longs versus shorts, it has done a decent bounce back up. I think there's still headroom for upside. For example, we are at 64 and the current percentile top is at 90. And AVAX has done that not just twice, but it has managed to hold around that level for quite a long time in 2024. I think in this cycle, we kind of deserve AVAX should do something around those figures, at least once more. Let's see the socials. And you can see for what it can do, for example, getting into 6% total social dominance across all social networks, being now at barely 0.47, that's definitely the low end of the spectrum for attracting people. So think about it, that currently things are still very quiet for Avalanche, and that is because the spotlight is being stolen by other coins at the moment, which tells me that maybe this is just part of the sentiment at the moment, but not necessarily because we are attracting a lot of people yet. We have formed double bottoms in here. We tracked this double bottom. It managed to reach the target, but then it came for a painful retest of the same levels of 15 point something. After that, we got a larger double bottom, and this double bottom is pointing slightly higher, right? Because the structure is bigger. That points us into the next resistance of $40. In between, we're gonna definitely face the resistance at 34, actually it's 32, which is immediately next after having crossed the $30. Let's look at liquidations. Of course, I'm gonna ignore the liquidity that was plotted in here in the previous cycle. I'm gonna mainly focus on what we have managed to accumulate above these tops. We have the 69, then the 62 to 56. We got a big chunk from this order block that is accumulated around the area from 44 to 46. But the most immediate liquidity, the most relevant at the moment, is this one that we have just taken. And when you just take a big, large pool of liquidity, the big risk is what could be the reaction after that. So let's look at the downside. What do we have there in case we get a swing low? We still have a little bit remaining, 31 to 32. There is still liquidity, but then immediately to the downside for a bullish test, we have 27, 26, and 23. After that, we're going a little bit too deep to test the 20. So let me see on the weekly, what does it mean to go now to 20 and retest that level? Well, after all, this rally came back down to where it started, right? So that is how painful AVAX can punish late longs, basically retracing everything. So coming from here, 31, and retracing to 20, is it the end? Not necessarily. We are still in an area where there's little attraction of retail, and if retail doesn't step in here, profit takers could send the price back to there. That is not the end of the world. The area most traded at the moment is 24. That should act as support, but a pinch, a week into 20, not impossible. So manage your risk when trading AVAX. That's what I'm trying to say. Then from 20, we can do another leg up. Think about this. This went to 26, retraced to 15. That is a drop of 42%. And after that, it didn't care. It still did 100% up. So trade it like a hectic ex-girlfriend that you don't want to call again. Now, if we did a bullish retest on 27 and the rest of the market is in a bullish uptrend and we start seeing that the social are starting to spike as well, we could go straight into 40. That is a low-hanging fruit in my opinion. But watch out, because at around 33 we start decreasing the liquidity. Then we are talking about way smaller pools. There is liquidity, but it's very small. We could say that there is a vacuum of liquidity, let's say from 37 to 44, and then again we get large chunks back in the game. And that leads me to think about that potential global breakout of AVAX against other currencies, not against USDT, but to break out against Ethereum, break out against Total3, and be kind of the spotlight. Can we once again attract something like 6% of all the people talking about cryptocurrencies around the globe? Once again, I think so, because this is increasing from 2, 3, almost 4, 5, 6. What if we could get a last leg up in social dominance to 7, 8, 10% on AVAX? Wouldn't that be great? I think it's possible. And I'm also holding AVAX, so I have a personal interest in seeing that. That's why I'm taking the extra mile in doing this particular chart. We're going to analyze AVAX against Ethereum, and I'm going to show you what could happen if this plays out. And I'm also going to analyze it against Total3, including this time for the first time ever the Z score. But let's look at on-chain data. What do we have here? We have everything hitting up. Taker sell on spot, on futures, and futures volume bubble map. In terms of news, everything looks bullish, but be careful, when everybody shouts one way and you have all that risk, there is a potential for slightly moves down, and AVAX is the king of taking retracement, so keep that in mind for however style of trading you're gonna apply. We got a 9, an 8, and a 7, all of them bullish, the top one very bullish. Bitwise files for an S1 for a spot Avalanche ETF. Incredible that that's still not attracting retail. I guess everybody, even Pengu, is filing for an ETF. What the hell is going on? Are we gonna get ETFs from every single piece of crap? A US spot AVAX ETF will open regulated brokerage account access to AVAX and could drive new institutional inflows. The filing names Coinbase custody and outlines direct AVAX exposure. Number 2, we have media pickup Bitwise, again filing. What the hell with ChatGPT? It cannot identify that that's the same news. This is ridiculous. Every day ChatGPT is worse. Let me know in the comments which AI tool are you using really, because it feels like every answer I need to be slapping it in the face. ETF driven TA and targets. AVAX eyes 32 on filing. Well, I guess everything is about the filing. Fair enough. Let's go to this very interesting chart. As you can see, AVAX against Ethereum, the ratio has been selling off every time that it hits the top against Ethereum on the ratio, and that is very significant, and probably we could speculate that that's going to also be the case on the lower end, not just on the sells off, but also when we should be finding support. So let's do a line here on support and let's see what's going on. We broke support and we are currently reclaiming. That could turn into a liquidity hand that can grab all these shorts and squash them up until we get once again into resistance, or maybe, just maybe, we could have an all-time global resistance breakout against Ethereum. And if you think enough, Ethereum has been doing a lot, right? We went all the way down to the thousands and we made almost a 4 point something X getting into 4.9k. So that has squashed AVAX below this line. But now that we are in altcoin season, excluding the fact that BTC dominance might push higher a little bit, if you didn't watch my video today about Bitcoin, I suggest you watch it as well, because that could happen and that could mean AVAX has a hiccup in between achieving those more elevated targets. As you can see, AVAX has repeated this microcycle here twice against Ethereum, basically putting lower highs, lower lows, and eventually breaking out. The breakout that took AVAX to $60 happened right after that. So we are approaching this for a third test, or we could build a double bottom around here, ideally without even touching the line, and then eventually breaking out. That breakout, I really want to see it, because that could break out all time against Ethereum. Now here we have AVAX against USDT, and on the low end, let me change the color of this, we have the Z score. Okay, I don't want to bring fluffy words or more waka waka into the game, but I want to tell you more or less that this is like a statistical tool that tells you whether you are oversold or overbought. So why not using RSI? Well, it works in a different way. It's ideal when you're analyzing ratios. In this case, we are analyzing AVAX against Ethereum, and you can place a line like this at 1 or 2 standard deviations and see extremes, right? A horizontal line like this, or maybe like that, and you can find areas where you could be selling or starting to accumulate. It's not gonna be precise ever, and it's gonna mismatch the bottoms of RSI. For example, here it matches, here it matches, here RSI bottoms after the Z score. So that's why having both together can give you a better timing, maybe for finding some local bottoms. Of course, using it on the weekly or monthly higher time frames, high value for accumulation. Accumulation started on the 9th of June, and it's been around the area of accumulation in 4th of August, but it started departing from there and going into the median. Still some room to go to the upside. Something tells me that we could get into this top, and in this cycle potentially we could have a big move in here against Ethereum. The second ratio that really matters is the performance of Avalanche against Total3. Again, the same indicators, but in this case we can place the line of the accumulation around here and the distribution around there. It's just by eye. I'm trying to find where we meet with tops, right? So here is the top when we went in 9th of December. This is the 10th of June, and you can see that we are very low. That means that the performance of Avalanche has been declining against Total3, and that means that it hasn't really done that much yet, but eventually you could get into a point where this stops and it pinches. That is the moment to shine for AVAX, and that is what I'm looking for. At the moment, the RSI still hasn't crossed below 30, and neither the Z-score has gone that low in here. In my opinion, AVAX has been still underperforming this cycle, but there will be a moment where people are going to regret not having any of it. Once more, here is where we can see the immediate liquidity, 28, but then there is all this cloud that goes into 20. That is the current risk. And I think if the Bitcoin dominance pushes higher into the 46, 47, we could clear this easily. After all, Avalanche does those sort of things. It's also evident if we look at in the liquidation map. Guys, I hope this summary of Avalanche was good enough for you with a big catch up and bit forecasts. What did I say? I don't do forecasts. With my personal view on something that has a decent chance of happening within this cycle. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.